Hi there. Welcome again to the Ivory Tower Collections. In today's video, we are going to once again take a look at a Colecovision system. This is the same one you saw in a previous video. Only in this one, we are going to actually install a composite video upgrade into the system. Now, this is a very common video upgrade that can be performed on the Colecovision, and there are a number of different kits available that you can buy that all basically work and install pretty much the same way. The kit that I'm going to be using today is an older kit that I have on hand that I purchased from retrofixes.com, but there's also a board kit you can get from Console 5 directly as well. So I will have links to both of those in the video description at the bottom. So yeah, that's what we're going to focus on today, is just the basic process of putting in a Colecovision composite video upgrade into a Colecovision system. Let's go ahead and get started. What tools might we need for this project? Well, let's go ahead. Let's see. We're always going to need our number 2 Phillips. Again, this seems to be a de facto tool that's just pretty much required for almost any console repair or modification work. I would also advise the use of some small needle nose pliers and or some tweezers. You will probably also need, in fact I know you're going to need some wire strippers. Some good set of wire strippers. You're also going to need a good set of side flush cutters. However, you don't need that hair that's in the picture there. Also, you're going to want to make sure that you have other things on hand for soldering, such as some liquid solder flux, obviously some solder, and things to clean up your messes with, like a toothbrush, some IPA, good quality IPA. And obviously you're going to need the composite circuit or composite kit itself. We'll take a look at this one real quick. That comes from retrofixes.com. His kits, by the way, you can order with or without RCA jacks. I tend to order them without them because I already have the jacks on hand. So that's and also it reduces the cost a little bit for the kits. But yeah, typically what you'll get is you'll get a small pre-populated board right here. This is actually the composite amplification circuit right here, and you'll get a length of some ribbon cable wire to use for the installation. I don't normally always use this wire, even though it comes with it. I have wire of my own that I use, plus you know, I might need longer lengths of wire depending on how I install it. And you'll also get a square of some double-sided foam adhesive tape or adhesive sticker. And this of course is to attach to the bottom of the board and apply it to either the top of an IC chip or some other empty spot on the main board where it can be put in place. As far as the AV out is concerned, that's really up to the installer or up to you if you're doing this work yourself. I will not be showing the actual installation of the audio video jacks in this video for reasons. One, it's subjective. You can put them wherever you want. I tend to use standard RCA jacks, panel mount jacks on the back for the composite video output, as well as for the left and right audio. Although it's not in stereo, it gets wired up in dual mono. So really the focus of this video is just to go through the process of installing the composite mod itself in place, and not so much about the aesthetics or how the AV jacks may be wired in. During the video, I'll give you ideas on where I might usually place mine, but again, don't think that that is a requirement or that you have to place yours in the same place. So with that, let's get cracking to disassembling a Colecovision. Now that we have the main board removed, it's time to start thinking about the placement for our little composite amplifier board here. Now, it's a fairly small board, and again, this is going to depend on which kit you get. Different kits will come with these in different sizes, of course, depending on how the designer wanted to put it together. But this one from Retrofixes is pretty decently sized. It's pretty small, and there are a couple of places you could put it. Again, it does come with some double-sided foam tape to help you adhere it to a surface somewhere. Sometimes I will use this, but I will also use Velcro that I have as well. I've got adhesive Velcro strips that are designed to stick to two different surfaces. In fact, I'll pull it out here so you can get a quick look at it. So it comes on a roll like this, and it adheres really well, and it's actually about the exact same width as this board. So this is probably the stuff I'll use in this particular case, just because it's like an exact match. So this is your standard, you know, this is just standard Velcro material. It comes on two separate rolls. You've got the ones with the little tiny plastic hooks, and you've got the one with the fabric loop side, so they can hold together. And I use this mainly not only because I can cut it to size more easily to fit the component, but it allows the component to also still be fairly easily removed for some reason if you have to. And the adhesive that's on this is perfectly strong enough to hold things in place, but also not impossible to remove either, in case you ever want to take everything back to stock. So going back to that, how do I want to mount this? Where do I want to mount this? Again, it's completely up to you. There's a couple different places on the board. It's pretty common for a lot of people to mount it somewhere near the video, on top of video chips like this, you know, up in the corner, perhaps. And that's fine. It's just that I try to stay away from mounting things like this onto surfaces that heat up. And these original memory chips, video RAM chips on the Colecovision, can get quite warm. Also, you can see there's this large heat sink here for the VDP. So, you know, there can be some heat here, and, you know, just, I'm afraid of the adhesive just kind of getting gummy over time. So one good place to install it is actually right on top of the BIOS chip itself if you want. It doesn't really get all that hot on the BIOS chip, as there's really not much for it to do. And so that's probably where I'll install it in this instance. I'll just cut a little piece of Velcro along here that's around the same length as this IC chip, and then another square on the bottom of this to match it up when I go to install it. But before I do that, I'm going to have to get everything wired in first. So if we take a good look at this board, and there's really just a few points that have to be soldered to, which is really nice about this one. As you can see here, we've got indications for where our voltage input goes in. In this case, it's taking 12 volts, which comes off of the RF modulator section. I'll show you where we pull that from. Also, this is where our video input goes in, also from the RF modulator section. Here is where we attach a ground for the board to operate from. There are spots inside the RF modulator for getting ground, but again, you can pretty much get ground from anywhere. I tend to pull ground wherever it's closest to wherever I install this little board. And then on the opposite side here, we have another ground and the VO, which means video out. So this would be your ground and video output going back to your AV jacks, whatever you use, RCA jacks or what have you. So yeah, that's all that has to be soldered up. So from here, let me go ahead and we'll get the main board back into place, and I'll show you where we solder these connections to. Now, the actual connections for the small composite board to attach to, pretty much all of them can be found right underneath the RF modulator within the box housing itself. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid off of this RF modulator real quick. Just pop it off like that. And then I will try and get focused in on this section. So there's really just two primary points that I'm concerned with grabbing from the RF modulator section, and that is the power and the video itself. The power one's actually pretty easy to get to because it can be pulled from right here. There's a large, basically an unused via just below, in the shot that you have here, it's just below this plastic tab for the interconnect between the board and the main board. But this is an excellent point right here that you can attach your 12 volts from to get power. And then the other one that we're concerned with is actually the video itself. And that's also pretty easy to get to because it's just the third pin up from there. 1, 2, 3 right here. And again, there is another unused via right here that we can actually solder our wire to use for video. Now, if you wanted to get your ground from here, well, there's any number of places you can get it. You can get ground from right here. You can get it by just attaching the ground and soldering up to any of these points that anchor the RF modulator board to the side of the shield. So lots of ground points there. There's also spots on the main board itself where you can get ground, and we'll take a look at that. kits will usually have an installation guide that comes with them, and they'll tell you different things about where to install everything, and they'll work fine. There's no problem. Again, most of the connections you need can be found within the RF modulator, but that doesn't mean that there aren't alternate locations that might be more convenient. And that's what I'm going to show you here. So two of the connections that we definitely need to use with this little board is we need 12 volts input, and we also need a ground. That's actually marked on the little board right up here. And there are two pretty close locations, actually they're very close by, if I decide to put the little board right here. So to check this, I'm going to get my, my multimeter here, put it in continuity, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you. So I've readjusted this a little bit. So again, if I'm going to have my little board sitting on top of the BIOS chip here, it would be nice if I could find really closer locations to attach my positive voltage that needs to go to the board in addition to my ground. And there are locations on the board to do this. There's lots of places, and in fact, on the bottom of this board, it actually has it labeled where the main 12 volt rails are located, -5, +5, and grounds, which is very handy. But it also allows me to map out other alternate points on top of the board that I could attach these to, so I don't necessarily have to run everything into the RF modulator if I don't really want to. So as an example, let's check for an alternate location for 12 volts. I'm going to put one end of my meter probe here on the 12 volt rail, starting off right from the switch here by this large inductor. And then I happen to know that right here where this jumper wire is, it's been put into place, it's marked WJ2 on the board, happens to be another 12 volt source. Watch. I'm sure you could hear that. That was my meter telling me, yes, there's continuity here. It also has pretty low resistance, so that's very handy. But what about ground? Well, ground can be all over the place as well. I'm just going to put one end of my probe here on this large pin connection here for ground on the expansion pins. And right here, just off to the side of where I'm going to install this board, just to the, now in your angle this is going to be below it, but in reality it's just to the left of the BIOS chip, are several large traces, and this one right here is ground. Lots of unused vias for ground on this board. So yeah, I can just attach my ground directly to this for the chip. So that'll be very handy, because that means I'm just going to have a very short little wire that's got to go from here to here, and a fairly short wire for the voltage going from here to here. That will just leave the main wire for the video input, which will still have to be ran into the RF modulator box itself. So normally the video input wire will come off of pin 3 right here, which has an unused via on the top of the RF modulator board that can be used to solder your wire to. And I'm still going to use this point for my video input. However, in order to really get the wire through here into the box, you frequently will have to find ways to modify or cut an opening into the box. What some people will do is use tin snips or some other method to basically cut away a section or remove parts of the bracket on some of the sides long enough to run the wires through. Since I really only have just the one wire that I now know that I need to feed over to this pin or to this location, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use my desoldering braid and my soldering iron at a high heat and just try to remove some of the solder that's been placed in here holding this particular portion of the bracket to the RF modulator board. And in doing so, I should be able to give myself a large enough opening to be able to slide a single wire up through here and attach it where I need to go. That way I don't really have to make any cut modifications on the RF modulator box itself. So now I'll be able to just run that straight over to where the board's going to go, and that'll make that a lot easier as well. Pretty much just kind of be a straight shot right over there. And then in addition to that, I've got a little piece of wire here that I've already cut that I'll use for the ground, and then I've got some wire here that I'm going to use for the 12 volts that needs to go to the board. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and probably cut some of these wires up a little bit where I need to, or kind of guesstimate where I'm about going to need them to be soldered up, and I'm going to go ahead and attach them to this little composite board right here. So I will do that right now. Now that I have the basic wires in place where I'm going to need them to, what I can do at this point, now again you'll notice that I haven't officially attached this down yet to the BIOS chip, and the reason for that is because I want to maintain a fairly flat surface for everything. So I want to get my wires soldered in first before I actually attach it, because otherwise the wires may not go in as far as I need them to. Let me put this back in the frame. So yeah, if I go ahead and attach this to the top of the BIOS chip first, then the problem I'm going to run into is when I go to put in additional wires or solder them in, they may not fit through well enough because, you know, it's already sitting on top of something that's blocking the path of these vias. So for now, I just kind of wanted to get the wires essentially where I needed them to go. The video input wire was really the only one that I wanted to have in all the way. But yeah, I've got it soldered in where I need to, up in the RF modulator here off of pin 3, counting from 1, 2, 3. I've got it on this unused pad here, soldered into place and trimmed up. It goes in nicely through the opening that I gave myself that's already in the side of the box here for this one wire, and just kind of tucked it in, trimmed it to length, soldered into place. So really the only thing left to do now is I'm going to need to put possibly 2 additional wires that I need to solder off of here for my ground and video out, but I will do that separately off camera. And again, these are the wires that you're going to run to your composite output jack, however you decide to do that with. It would either be again through a standard RCA jack where the V out would go to the center post and the G or the ground would then attach to the ground tab on the outside. But again, it can come from either the board, which is a nice convenient place, that's why they put a pad there for you to solder to, or it can come from anywhere along the board itself, the main board of the Colecovision. So yeah, let me just kind of get this trimmed up and tidied up real quick, and we'll go from there. I now have some preliminary wires that I've got coming off of the bottom of my little board here, and I'm ready to attach it to the top of the BIOS chip in this case. Now what I did off camera was I had actually used my alcohol and Q-tips and toothbrush to clean both the bottom of the composite board itself, just to get any residual flux or anything off of it, as well as making sure that the surface of the IC chip itself that I plan to attach to is also clean. So from here, I've got 2 pieces of my Velcro that I have cut out to length. So now I've got a little piece that'll fit just about perfect right there on the top of that. And then I've got another piece here for the composite board itself. I'm just making sure that I'm covering up any of the contact points or any of the leads that soldered through on the bottom side of the board, just to prevent any potential shorting. And then I'm just going to stick it right on top of here like this. So now at this point, All I need to do is just need to set up my power and ground where I need them to go and just kind of trim them into place. I've got two wires here that I've already soldered for my output for both my ground and my video, and they have temporary little pins on the ends of them here, and the reason for that is because before I drill any holes into the case shell, I always want to test and make sure that this is going to work the way it needs to. So I've got these little test harnesses that I created some time ago with RCA jacks on them and DuPont connector setups, so I can quickly and easily just connect these up where I need to, for instance for my ground, for my video output here, and then plug it into the appropriate RCA jacks to test it. And this way I can be sure that everything's going to work and look the way I need it to before I actually do any case modification itself. So that takes care of the composite modification board itself, now installed and routed where it needs to. And again, I've got some temporary leads here that I'll connect up to a test jig that I use for making sure everything's good to go before installing the permanent RCA jacks or whatever I need to use in this case. But one thing remains. We've talked about the video, but what about audio? Well, that's actually pretty easy. Most of the composite AV kits will also tell you this as well, and that is that audio can actually also be tapped from off of the RF modulator box. Audio can actually be gotten from a point right here. There's an unused pad right here, but it also attaches to a component leg here and also to a point here as well on the interconnect board. So there's a couple of different places. But again, if you want to limit how many wires and openings you have to cut into the RF box, there's actually a much simpler place to get audio from. And this is where most of us will actually tap audio. And it's right here. There is a ceramic disc capacitor right here next to the RF modulator that is actually marked as C88. At least it's marked as C88 on this particular board. I think I may have seen other designations. But you can actually tap audio from the left leg of C88 right here as you're looking down at the board with the front of the system facing you. It's going to be the left leg here. So all you got to do is just solder a fine piece of wire, or just a length of wire from off of C88 to the center RCA post of your audio output. And if you want to wire that to both a left and a right, then you just simply have to bridge that wire between both of the left and right audio jacks on their center posts, tied back to and attached back to this leg of C88. So doing that will give you good clean audio and is a very easy point to attach to. So I'm going to run a quick wire from off of that real quick. Be right back. I now have the Colecovision somewhat back together with my test leads connected up for my audio and video, and I also still have the RF attached as well. Now I do this as an additional means to make sure that the Colecovision is working, just in case the work I've put into it, in this case the composite upgrade, doesn't work. Then I still have the RF connected to make sure that the Colecovision itself is still functioning, and I know whether or not the issue, if it doesn't work, is either with the Colecovision somewhere else, maybe I made a mistake, connected something somewhere I shouldn't have, or if it's actually something with the work specifically related to the composite modification or upgrade. So my composite will display here on my little monitor here, and then the RF will display on my bigger flat screen behind me as well. So let's go ahead and power on the Colecovision now. And there we are. I've got my menus for my flash cartridge up. And do we have volume? Oh. So, hopefully this helps you in your future installs in trying to put in a composite upgrade inside of your ColecoVision. Again, this particular kit is just one of several that are very similar, but they basically all install and work the same way. With that, I will have some still pictures of some other completed installs I've done showing how the AV jacks are installed on the back, just as examples. Again, you can install whatever you want for your outputs and wherever you want them to go. So with that, thanks again for hanging out with me this afternoon here at the Ivory Tower, and I'll get you guys in the next video. Thanks.